Serious. What's the most horrifying sound you've ever heard? Breath leaving a dead body that's been sitting there a while. Heard it multiple times, always grossed me out. Human screaming from a burning car after a big crash. The people inside the car didn't make it, but it made me buy a fire extinguisher for my vehicles. Better safe than sorry. My phone ringing at 4 a.m., caller ID displaying my mother. She forgot about time zones and was just calling me to let me know she made it to her holiday destination safely. Afghan soldier. I was on a patrol with stepped on an IED and lost his leg. He screamed so loud and for so long I thought we would all go crazy from it. It's been 6 years and I still hear him screaming some nights. I was outside on the baseball field in high school when out of the completely clear blue sky came thunder. You know when you first hear it you turn around to see where the storm clouds are. No clouds. None. A couple minutes later I see some people running between buildings. Turns out I had heard the Mora building in Oklahoma City being blown up. I was in a small town 50 miles away, Ripley, OK. My sister turned out to be dating the son of the highway patrolman that caught McVeigh outside of Stillwater on I-35. The sound of my friend's mother finding out her daughter had been killed in a hit and run. She was wailing, fainting, coming to and wailing again. Will never leave me. I'm an Aboriginal from the top end of Australia. In remote communities it's commonplace for the women to hit their heads with stones until they bleed. The talk of them beating their own heads while they wail is a truly terrifying sound. It makes my skin crawl typing this. It was the dead of night one summer many years ago. I had the window open and was fast asleep when all of a sudden I heard the worst shriek in the world. It legitimately sounded like a woman was running, like her life depended on it. Turns out something was running for its life, but it was a rabbit running away from what I imagine was an owl. I've never heard a sound like it and I hope I never will again. The second worst sound I ever heard were the dying screams of a man who committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. The absolute worst sound I've ever heard was the silence that followed when his screams stopped. I've cared for a few residents with dementia, and some of them develop immense fears. You try to feed them, they are scared. You try to put them into bed, they are scared. I'm not an emotional person, but hearing someone you once knew very well to be reduced to that is heartbreaking. Their cries hit me like a brick. Code red. Teachers, please complete the safety procedures. When you hear that, but there is no scheduled drill. It's even worse when you're the teacher. There's a film of 9/11 where you can hear these thudding sounds in the background that are people jumping out of Tower 1 hitting pavement. It's not something you can unhear. Edit. I'm not going to link it. Google it yourself if you're that hell-bent on it. I have two that have stuck with me. 1. A screech of brakes followed by a thud, a dog howling and a gunshot at 2 a.m. Learned that a guy hit a dog and put it out of its misery straight afterwards. 2. The sound of my friend crying after she had been attacked, beaten and rode. I drove her to the hospital. Her wails of despair will forever stick in my mind. It was this scream I will never forget. My dad crying. I was a kid and don't really know what it was about, but I had never seen or hear him crying before, or since, with the exception of grandparents' funerals, and it was completely terrifying for me. My wife suffering from a miscarriage. Went through the bone. I cried. A crash, a short delay, a thud, and then screams. It was a motorcyclist hitting a car, flying into a parking lot, and the people in that parking lot screaming. The guy didn't make it. Horrifying might not be the right word, but the sound I'll never forget is my grandfather running through the house in his underpants, crying, screaming, praying to God to not take his wife. My grandmother had woken up, took one step out of bed and dropped dead from a brain aneurysm. They had been married over 50 years. We lived close so we got there pretty quick. He had picked her up out of the floor and she was lying on their bed. Very clearly dead. And the sounds of anguish I heard come out of this man's mouth. A man who I had never seen cry, or really express emotion at all, will be with me until the day I die. I went to college in a really bad neighborhood, like if you walked 2 blocks off campus you'd get mugged. One day I was outside of one of our buildings near the edge of campus smoking a cigarette before class and a drive-by shooting happened about 30 yards from where I was standing. I don't remember the shooting, but I remember the man laying there screaming, then after a minute he started getting quiet, then he went silent. He bled out before the ambulance could make it. We were camping and on the beach with our kids when it was reported a teenage boy was missing. My husband and a number of others did the hand-hold walk through the water. We heard a fellow say, "I've found him, underwater." By this time I was rushing my kids away from the beach because we knew this was bad. As we were leaving, I heard the mother scream, "That's my son." That was absolutely 200% the worst sound I have ever heard. It haunts me and can still hear the pain in her voice to this day. My best friend and I found an old vinyl record on the street. The cover art was some old black and white picture of kids with worms coming out of their eyes. Her boyfriend had a record player, so we decided to listen to it. We were expecting something edgy when out comes this long, horrifying hiss followed by bongo drums and some kind of singing that closely resembled tortured screams and deeply guttural moans of agony. It sounded like people being tortured with burning rods and dragged across coals, to the increasing beat of a sadistic bongo drum. Needless to say, we were scared shitless and chucked the record out the window. Yesterday when my palliative mother was screaming, "I'm ready to die," over and over. We gave her last doses of medications and she left us 45 minutes after. Heard many patients say the same thing in my profession, but this one's the worst. The sound of a wet body hitting the pavement from high up. It was a girl giving a high diving demonstration when she fell off the ladder. Sort of both a thud and a splat at the same time. She broke her arm, but she eventually got back to diving again. A 911 call where an elderly woman is being stabbed to death. Her screams make my blood run cold worried. A drunken bum taking a header on a subway platform in Chicago. Heard his head explode like a melon as he hit the concrete. He died. I'll say the creepiest sound I've actually experienced myself before is when I was all alone in the basement of my old house and a music box started playing just randomly all of a sudden. I won't forget the chills that ran down my spine. I just experienced sleep paralysis for the first time in my life, and every time I was about to fall asleep I would hear this menacing dog growling right behind my head. It was so close I could almost feel it. I couldn't move a single muscle in my entire body, but I had to listen to this sound for minutes at a time until I was able to break free of the paralysis. It sounded so real. I knew there was no dog in my bed, of course, but there was no way I was making that sound. It came from within my mind, auditory hallucination, but was so real that it gives me chills when I think about it. The sound a family member made when she found out her fiancé had died. It was a scream of pure anguish. I never want to hear it again. A test for a tsunami siren, pretty sure it was the same thing as a air raid siren. That sweeping wailing sound pierces your soul. Hearing it in real life is way more intense than hearing it in movies. Gives me the chill just thinking about it. I can't feel. My wife said this to me before I called 911. Unbeknownst to her, she was having a major stroke. I recognized it immediately as she had all the signs: drooping face, slurred speech, and the look of fear and confusion as the paramedics took her. Fortunately, she's still with us. Recovery will be a lifelong process, and though she's gained quite a bit of mobility back, she's a long way away from being fully mobile, which, given how major the stroke was, will more than likely never happen. I've replayed that moment every day for the past 5 years, not on purpose, but because it's so horrifying that I can't get it out of my head. I do a lot of jungle trekking and have heard some pretty scary things. In order: 4. Deep, loud breathing in the pitch dark, feet away from my hammock in Khao Yai National Park, Thailand. Elephants came through our camp in the night. 3. The first time I heard howler monkeys in Tikal, Guatemala. They sound like a zombie horde. 2. A tiger chuffing on the outskirts of my camp at night in Kerinci Seblat National Park, Sumatra, Indonesia. 1. The sudden crackle of a poacher's walkie-talkie in the middle of Chitwan National Park, Nepal. Probably the most dangerous because if you're found by find poachers in the jungle, it's usually not good. Everybody down and nobody gets hurt. The gunshot as a 9mm bullet entered my chest, from one female away. 2 cars colliding. When I was around 12, I was walking down a river back to my house. I know that there are a lot of crocs in there, probably freshies, but usually I never hear or encountered one. And then it happened. I was walking back to my home around 6 or 5, and I heard a big hiss. My country is known for many snakes, but this sound wasn't no ordinary sound. It was a salt water croc. I got my phone and turned on the flashlight. There it was, just standing there beside the water's edge, staring at me. I think it was a 6 female juvenile salty back then. IDK I don't even know Crocs back then, I was a math geek or something, I just ran the hell as fast as I can. I still remember it staring at me in my dreams. A woman who didn't realize both of her legs had been torn off, one about 10 yards away, screaming for her children. Thankfully they were not only safe and unharmed, but with good people waiting for the paramedics and police. She had basically been ripped in half, and all she could think about was her kids. She was hit by a very elderly man. She had been on the shoulder helping someone who was stuck, and the man who hit her was way out of the lane and onto the shoulder because his night vision isn't great. There has to be a point where no, we don't want to take someone's independence away, but come on. Some people don't need to be driving at their age, with their limitations. Hearing an Amber Alert go off on my phone in the middle of the night. I don't know why, but it made my heart drop. I know the implications, but it feels so much more sinister at night. People burning to a crisp, blood dripping from a dead body, very slowly, crunching of bones of some deaf folk being cut out of a car, that distant whimpering of someone waiting to be rescued after having a massive accident. Top worst thing, the sound of my clavicle splitting upon hitting the road at +30 kph on my MTB. The sound of my father's crying when he received his diagnosis of malignant pancreatic cancer. We knew it was cancer, but for him it was the reality of the situation hitting home. He lived for about a year after that, and I make sure I left nothing unsaid. I'm glad for the time we had together. My aunt shrieking in complete and utter horror when she woke up in the middle of the night as I was coming out of the bathroom, having completely forgotten that I was staying the night and thinking I was an intruder. I could barely manage to say, "It's me." I was so freaked out. People actually screaming in terror is itself fucking terrifying. Hearing struggled and regretful breathes when someone has hung themselves. I was maybe 6 to 7 years old when I was at my cousin's house. He put me in the kitchen for a snack, then went into the bathroom to kill himself by hanging. I heard him start to breath and grunt real weird, but I didn't think much of it until like 20 minutes later when he didn't come out yet. I got my aunt to tell her that he's still in the bathroom and she found him dead. I didn't know what had happened until I was 11. When I got the call saying my mother was gone. A laughter in my voicemail. Just a laughter, without any comment or explanation. It was by my father, whom was standing outside of my door wasted waiting for me to open it. Couldn't quite describe it, but there's a super loud scream in some of my dreams that always wakes me up in chills. Don't remember what it was like, just horrifyingly awful. My mom was holding my dog as the dog died. The dog breathed out one last time and stopped moving, and we sat for a few minutes as my mom held onto her crying. Very clearly no more breathing, eyes open and lifeless, it was hard to watch. Then the dog woke up. The cough and raspy breathing that came from the dog after it came back to life is something I'll never be able to forget. Not nearly as frightening as most of these. But, as a woman, hearing a knock on your door late at night when you're alone is petrifying to me. Working in downtown Houston several years ago, there was a guy who went to the top of a parking garage after losing his job. 10 stories. Jumped. I was about 3 blocks away. It made a sound I'll never forget. Like a boom. But, thicker. Didn't see it. Felt it, like a shockwave. Maybe it was psychological. Was on the phone with my husband when he was killed in a single car accident, he was the passenger. The tires screeching, the actual impact of the vehicle on the first flip, and his best friend screaming his name as shock set in all tie for most horrific sound I've heard. The sound a shotgun makes when it's pumped and aimed at you. Okay, the aiming doesn't make a sound, but if it's aimed elsewhere, the cocking noise is 100 million x less terrifying. Windows Update sound. At the time of me writing important doc. During the nighttime me and my dad heard wolves tearing up stray dogs and cats. Nightmare fuel for a 6-year-old.